Why does Cullen Roche need to meet Chris Vasseur, aka Coach Vass? This is a fascinating one, people. We're going to talk about who you think you'll be versus who you'll become. And man, from somebody who's been all over the finance industry into one of the preeminent thought leaders of our business, we get some of that journey. But we also get how somebody with high school or football coaching ambitions goes through everything from high school all the way up to the NFL. It's really interesting. We talk about scoreboards as a metaphor, plural, scoreboards of life, how we can or mutually plan them, pick them, why, and we answer, or at least Coach Vass asked Cullen, do politics matter? And you're going to hear what Cullen has to say about that. We have a really interesting conversation, career transitions, life transitions. It's all in here. Jack forehand, roll some clips.
As you know, Matt, I am new to finance, very new. When he said boring indexing, I was like, let's talk about that. Did you see my reaction when he popped on camera?
I did. I almost wish
I was like, oh, I got very excited.
Investing is a loser's game in the sense that it's the person who doesn't make the most mistakes wins.
At the end of the day, there's a winner and a loser, and it's on the scoreboard, and it's in public, and everybody gets to see.
One of the best things you can do to improve your performance is probably to lose your brokerage password.
So I bought a bunch of books on investing. My first books weren't Jack Bogle and all these other things. It was all the behavioral stuff. So I got this Weig book, Morgan Housel. That's where I started.
Life inevitably requires prediction. There are smart ways to make forecasts, and there are really stupid ways to make forecasts.
You're watching Just Press Record right here on Cultish Creative YouTube. I'm Matt Zeigler. And hey, this is the show where I invite two people who have never met before, but I know them. I know they share something in common. We're going to see if they can figure it out by the end of the episode, what I wrote down on the back of my card here. So let's prove how much fun growing your networks can be. This first guest, I'm going to explain him in terms of one of my personal love languages, which is Tecmo Super Bowl. So if I were to explain this guest, what I'm going to say is he's the Montana to Rice of modern monetary connections. He's the Bo Jackson sweep of trusting the process because it just can't be beat, reminding us always why he puts the disciplined fun into discipline funds. And because I need at least one defensive reference for the next guest, shout out to Detroit, the Barry Sanders coverage game, or if you pick the nose tackle and you get the timing down just right, this guest is that unstoppable snap dive sack, the Jerry Ball of sneak attacks, especially in Twitter macro ball. It's the one and only Cullen Roche. How are you, Cullen?
I'm awesome. God, I really wanted to be Herschel Walker, though.
So I had this.
Am I wrong? Was he not the best running back in Tecmo Bowl?
I mean, Bo was the best. Barry was close. Herschel was pretty awesome, though. Herschel was a pretty awesome player. And you had lots, listen, Scrambling Randall on the Eagles, man, that's my stuff too.
The Cowboys were dreadful, I think, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, because it was right before, it was like 91, 92, that season.
Yeah, right before they went on their big run.
Yeah, and the Redskins.
Yeah. What was it called? Was it the train run?
Might have been the great, yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, before I lose my mojo here, this next guest, we got to drill into the other direction. So I'm going FinTwit themes to explain him. This is how we translate words back and forth. He's the Morgan Housel of normalizing and humanizing how we talk about an otherwise boring topic, which is how he's made defensive strategies great again. He's the Wes Gray of taking value data sets from practitioners and academics alike, all to build out novel processes and products in his space. I so admire how he takes his data to the practice and to the field. And last but not least, the Cliff Asness of having way too much quantitative knowledge, still while retaining a sense of humor, a skill I can only refer to as breadth and depth. Yes, breadth and depth. I assume it's as true for the small cap value premium as it is for defensive line selection. Size matters, but mind your junk. Chris Vasseur, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. That's fantastic. I was looking forward to the intros.
Well, we got to do it right. It's the only way to do it. And Cliff didn't write the Size Matters, but Mind Your Junk paper, that wonderful Seinfeld reference, or he didn't come up with the title. It's an industry secret. If either of you ever crack it, who actually is culpable for it, I expect an answer someday. I'm starting to hear Cullen, humanize your brain a little bit for us. The finance industry interest. How old were you when you're like, I want to work around money or business and money?
God, I was interested in money, I think, as soon as I realized you needed it to survive.
Okay, but that's different than wanting a job or
No,
Yeah.
no, my, God, I mean, I was much more lured to like creative thinking in school. And so I was always of the mindset that like I was going to be like work at like a marketing agency or something. Like I wanted to make commercials or like do something more creative, artistic, and which was a terrible idea because I'm not really very artistic, but you know, that was like the young, stupid Cullen. But my uncle at my oldest brother's graduation came up to me. This is when I was trying to choose my major in school. And I was already in the business school at Georgetown. So like I was kind of on track, you know, in some related industry already. But like my uncle come up to me and he's like, what's your major going to be? And I was telling him how I wanted to be like a marketing major. And he's like, you know, don't be that, you're a dipshit. Don't choose that. You got to go into finance and investing. That's where the money is. That's the only way you're going to make money in life. And that was literally the moment where I was kind of like, oh, and this guy was someone who was very successful. He was a executive at a big public company, had made a lot of money. And so I kind of, you know, put him on a pedestal in terms of, you know, people that I respected. And so that was the moment where I kind of like pivoted and I was like, oh, all right, maybe I need to go where the money is.
maybe you need to go where the money is. Vass, what about you? Like when coaching, sports, all this stuff, when did you think that was an actual viable job for you? Not just a cool thing.
Oh, it was years into my career already. I was like, I guess I could do this. So I was a student at the University of Miami, and I'd worked, and I'd played when I was younger, but I had worked at this camp, and I really clicked with like the older males, you know, 15, 18. I loved working with them. I loved kind of mentoring them, and I loved football. And I had a friend that played at Notre Dame, Anthony Brannon, excuse me, and I was like, I have this crazy idea. I want to coach football. I haven't really told anybody because I think it's insane. And he goes, oh, you'd be great for it. He was like, well, how, why, what would, and he says, look, you work well with young people. You're a hard worker. There's plenty of guys at the time. Now it's a lot more prevalent, but at the time there's only a few people that had really done it without playing major football. And so I basically begged my way on at Miami. I called them every day for 6 weeks. Like, we'll get back to you in a week. And I called them every day for 6 weeks. I got on and I just was like, I'm going to go with this. I want to get my master's. I'm going to find a place that will let me hang out. So I'd cold called about 40 schools my senior year in college. And San Jose State gave me the best opportunity. Had no idea where it was. Didn't know where it was. Nothing. And I packed up my Honda Accord. I got into grad school, and I was going to be the video guy. And then I would do my job, and then I would hang out with the coaches, and I wanted to see, you know, is this life for me? And both my mentors were like, hey, this is all well and good, but you got to go coach to see if you're even good at it or you like it. Like running tape and breaking down, that's a part of the job. So I went and coached high school football, and I fell in love. And I worked back into college. I went and coached at a D3 school in Mississippi, in Jackson, Mississippi. And I knew the first day, I was like, this isn't for me. I need to go back to high school. I remember I was telling the story yesterday. It was my first day. I'd driven from California to Jackson. This is in 2011. And I remember I went to the bathroom and I went to wash my hands. I turned the sink on and I went to put my hands under and I looked at myself in the mirror and I just like stared in the mirror and I was like, for 30 seconds ago, what the hell did I just do? And I just knew that life wasn't for me, you know, moving all around and all that. But so I ended up finishing the year and I went back to California. It was tough. I lived in my opinion, the nicest area in the country, Northern California, just south of San Francisco, Google country. Well, I guess I could name like 100 companies of what country we're talking about. And I just wanted to do that. And I didn't think much of it. And then life, you know my story. Life, I don't know if you want me to save that part.
Save that
life
part.
took me in a very, very different path.
Well, I'm curious about this because that whole back and forth thing that happens. Cullen, does this resonate with you? Like the back and forth on the first 1 through 7 jobs after school when you're figuring it out?
Oh yeah. I mean, 100%. Cause because I had no idea what I had sort of like the cheesy generic dream in finance, I guess, of like I was going to be some sort of like Gordon Gekko type, or like the fancy hedge fund trader or something like that. And getting there for me especially was a really curvy road, because like my first job out of college was working at John Hancock, and I was in like a boiler room with 50 other guys who were all right out of college, and we were slinging like whole life insurance and variable annuities and a bunch of things that I didn't understand and learned to really hate very quickly, which made it really hard for me to sell those things. So, and being kind of a little more analytical, I was the type who like I would actually analyze the product rather than just trying to sell it to somebody, because I was trying to understand it to actually then be able to sell it to somebody. And working from that sort of like very first principles concept that I think a lot of people probably know my work, being consistent with now. But like I couldn't sell these things, because I remember like I went into my boss's office like, the first couple of weeks, and I was like, hey, John, this whole life insurance policy, it doesn't work the way that we claim it does. And I had like written out this whole big analysis, and he was like, what the fuck are you doing? You're not a whole life insurance analyst. You're a whole life insurance salesman. And he crumples up the piece of paper, throws it in the garbage. He's like, go sell these things. Stop analyzing them. And I was like, I lasted probably like another month at that job before I left. And so, yeah, my like career arc though was basically like a series of like stumbles through the industry where I then moved on to Merrill Lynch, where I was slinging stocks, and I was a little bit closer to what I kind of thought I wanted to be doing, but not quite there. And then I left Merrill. I actually started a hedge fund and, a private partnership, and, was doing like the active trading thing and did really well for 5 years. And the financial crisis hits, and I sort of realized again, I was like, wait a minute, this is unsustainable, stupid. This is not the optimal way to actually be doing any of this. And I don't even ethically agree with like what I'm doing from like a trading perspective and the fees I'm charging. And so then I, kind of pivoted again into like, more like the RIA world, where I'm, now kind of doing more like almost like boring, behaviorally driven index fund investing. So it's kind of come full circle with me, where I kind of have stumbled from, almost like mistake to mistake to mistake, until I've kind of finally started to find something that I really actually believe in personally and ethically and professionally.
Vass, what Cullen said there about you have to understand it before you sell it? Because I feel like in coaching, you had to go through some similar version of that.
Yeah. The great thing about coaching is you can have an idea, and this is where, so I'm going to back up a step. So in my grad school, I got my master's in sports psychology, and I had to take an undergrad prereqs, and I took an IO psych class, industrial and organizational psychology, which is, for those of you who don't know, is like basically the psychology of the workplace. And sports psych came from that. And so what ends up happening is sports psych starts, and then IO psych, because with business, you don't always know what's going to be good. You have quarterly earnings reports, and you can pass the buck. This product didn't work because Billy fucked up the marketing, and we didn't see the problem with the materials.
It's always Billy's fault. It's always Billy.
Billy's fault.
Yeah.
And remember that, it'll get you
Fucking
through life.
Billy.
Find your Billy and blame him for everything. The lessons with Coach Vass. But the great thing about sports, and where IO Psych started looking back to sports, this thing that came from it was, doesn't matter what you think, doesn't matter how you feel. At the end of the day, there's a winner and a loser, and it's on the scoreboard, and it's in public, and everybody gets to see. So you had to take this stuff apart, and you had to take it apart fast. And if you didn't take it apart, the other guy was going to take it apart for you. And there were no deadline extensions. There were no, hey, we'll revise. And pardon me, guys. As you know, Matt, I am new to finance. Very new. When he said boring indexing, I was like, let's talk about that. I want to talk about that. Can we talk about that? Can we talk about that? Friday at 7:30, the whistle's going to blow. There's going to be people yelling at you, and they're going to tell you how they feel. You don't get to hide, not read the comments and all that stuff that they tell people not to do. There's nowhere to hide. And it's you, the other guy or team. I'm using one-on-one. There's a scoreboard, and it doesn't matter what you thought was right, what you thought was wrong. There's a winner and a loser, and we could talk about it after. And that idea and that pressure that it invariably creates, there's nothing like it, in my opinion, in the sense that we can debate, like, and this is what's I don't want to go on a tangent, but this is what's pissing me off about, like, the debate shows. Like, everybody's turned into a debate team. Like, we can't have a game anymore. It's not only the game, but we have to have debate team after, and then whoever's the best debate. No. The scoreboard tells you who the winner is, whether you like it or not. So to answer your question directly, oh yeah, you got it every week. There was no like, oh, we'll pass the buck. There was no, in the league I was in, you were locked in coaches. So there wasn't like you call somebody in and like get it. No. And it was, you want to talk about pressure. And again, low table stakes. I mean, we're talking big time. I'm using air quotes and eye rolls, big time high school football. Again, in the grand scheme of things, what I'm calling him Colin. What Cullen's doing and what you do is real big time. But at the end of the day, they're going to write about your ass in the newspaper, and you better figure it out. Not that, and again, I don't want to make it sound like, oh, that was my motivating factor, but yeah, you had to figure it out, and fast.
There's something about this, and I wonder if, Cullen, if this resonates with you. The scoreboard kind of feels like when you have to compare yourself to market returns or something else. There's a real reality when people are like, here's the board, here's how we're going to measure you. You can't hide behind this. When did that pressure creep into your life?
Well, this is a weird one, especially with the finance and investing world. Like the old analogy is that, like, investing is it's a loser's game, basically. That it's a little different than, say, professional sports or, whatever, any really competitive sport, in the sense that once you get to a certain level, it's a winner's game. The competition, the competitors are so close in their, relative athletic ability that
if the skill's up here, luck is all that's left
won
almost.
by who wins. Not unlike the analogy is always tennis in investing, is that for most investors, investing is a loser's game, in the sense that it's the person who doesn't make the most mistakes wins. So you win by not losing, basically. The analogy is amateur tennis, where, when amateurs are playing tennis, the person who wins is the person who has the least number of faults, basically. Whereas with professional tennis, the winners are the guys who shoot the best shots, basically. So it's a professional tennis is a winner's game, whereas amateur tennis is a loser's game. And investing is a lot more like amateur tennis, in the sense that the way to win really is to avoid the big catastrophic mistakes. It's the people that don't sell into bear markets. Did you sell all your stocks when all the tariff BS was going on a few weeks ago? Those are the losers. Those are the people that they lose the loser's game because they make a big behavioral mistake in a somewhat frightening environment. So it's little things like that. That add up into these huge catastrophic mistakes of, and this is things like paying huge amounts of taxes, paying huge amounts of fees all along the way, taking really concentrated, unnecessary risks that result in a blow up of a portfolio. It's things like that make investing very different than, competitive sports, in this sense that you win by losing less than a lot of the other people playing the game.
Yeah, shout outs to Charlie Ellis. And I'm really curious about this. Vass, Michael Mobison, you running this name yet? Success.
Morgan Stanley.
Some Morgan Stanley stuff, skill and luck, all that.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think about that? The skill and luck in the loser's game. Is this an expression you're familiar with?
I am, but I feel like investing. What's the Joe Pesci line? If you win, you win. If you lose, you still win. Is that from Raging Bull?
I think that was Raging Bull.
You lose, but like, again, I'm coming from a different world. So the people that maybe regularly watch us are probably like, all right, who's this pale ass, long haired guy that doesn't know anything about him?
Well, wait, let's play this game then before you say that.
No, but
Cullen, I want you to guess. Who is this pale, long-haired, say all the derogatory comments about him that you want? No, please don't do that.
the whole time I'm like, I'm looking at
the
myself.
dorky guy with the collar.
Oh, we're going to go right back at you in a
Almost
second.
there.
Although I think he has a little more of a clue who you are than you of him. But if you had to guess, like on a random Thursday, besides recording a podcast with me, who do you think this Vass character is? Take a blind guess. Wrong answers are welcome here.
Herschel Walker.
He's Herschel Walker,
Close.
incarnate. Close.
Almost. Very good guess.
Wait, Vass, play the game in the other direction. What do you know of Cullen? What do you think Cullen's doing on a Thursday besides
He
recording
is
silly podcasts?
creating a disciplined funds.
There we go.
I mean,
All right, so
he's answering the question, what is money? Wild guess.
wild guess with a raging bull over his
Can you move
shoulder.
can you move your chin a little bit? I can answer this better. No, I actually read a bunch of Cullen stuff, so I was. Did you see my reaction when he popped on camera?
I did. I
hope
almost
he
wish
saw
I.
it. I was like, oh, I got very excited.
I appreciate the Kaiser Sose-ness of the answer style, though. All right, Cullen, give like the give us the 60-second who is Cullen Roche pitch for Vass in your words. How do you describe what you do on the day-to-day today?
Gardening. I check my chickens. No, those are the things I wish I was doing every day.
I was like, is this a metaphor.
No, I sadly am very obsessed with gardening right now, and I own way too many chickens, is what I found out in the last few weeks, as they all started laying eggs at the same time, and now I have about 50 eggs that are rotting on my countertop in case anybody needs any eggs. But no, I think I have sort of really evolved into like more of a behavioral portfolio manager. I work with a lot of retirees, people that are transitioning into a period of life that is very uncertain, and I help people build very behaviorally robust portfolios that help them navigate this really big transition in life and help them sort of apply a lot of the sort of Boglehead style principles, but in probably a little more of a customized, hands-on manner where I'm building very custom portfolios for people that are applying a lot of what I've learned in macroeconomics and banking over the years in terms of like applying what I call an asset liability matching strategy, where I am working from a financial planning background where I'm quantifying the liabilities and expenses of people over time, and then I'm matching the right assets to that portfolio in a way that is going to help them meet their financial goals, but more importantly, is going to help them really stay literally disciplined to the portfolio and the strategy over the proper time horizons that we lay out relative to their financial plan. And that's what I do on a daily basis now, is helping people, whether it's other advisors or individuals, navigating this world of, it's a behavioral landmine is really what the investing world is. And I structure everything through these very temporally structured portfolios because I think that giving people certainty of time inside of their financial life is really, in my opinion, it's like the sort of like the holy grail of portfolio construction, is when you can give somebody certainty about how much money they're going to have at a certain point in their life, or you can at least give them a high degree of probability of how much money they're going to have at certain times in their life, they're much more likely to stay the course and stay disciplined to that portfolio. And that is also literally the thing that allows them to then focus on things like, their chicken obsession or their gardening obsession, so that they're not sitting around obsessing over their portfolio, primarily because they have so much uncertainty about it that they feel like they need to keep a close eye on it as if that's going to solve all of their investing problems, which 9 times out of 10 actually compounds it and makes everything worse.
Enter the therapy industry, who's not present on the call today. Vass, what about you? How would you explain what's the 60-second version of what you're up to in life these days?
Okay, so after some life changes, I had to move back to Orlando, and so out of desperation, I launched a business 9 days before COVID, and then that happened, so I redid it, or I relaunched another business. So basically, what I do now is um, pre-transition, which I'm sure at some point we'll get to because you know where I want to go. I create material content, podcasting. I do live webinars and things like that to help coaches, high school coaches. I work with, so on a mass scale, I mostly work with high school coaches and small college coaches. I've worked with international coaches. I've worked with an all women's team in Brazil. I mean, I've had some really fun experiences, and also work more directly, consulting also with college teams, mostly coaches, not like whole teams, but individual coaches. So, I've done some stuff with some staffs, and I've worked some in the NFL working, and I've done things like where we've had an offensive coach that wants to learn how a defense works, because everything you do, football's so segmented. You have offense, defense, and then special teams, like the kid in the corner that everybody doesn't like. I shouldn't say everybody. I don't like. That was my one, I guess you could say, rider in my contract. I'm speaking music terms, and my contract was no special teams. I refused. I was a prima donna. But it's so segmented. So what ends up happening is defensive coaches learn offense through the lens of defense, and vice versa. So what I do sometimes is I'll work with offensive coaches and be like, all right, I'm going to teach you defense from a defensive perspective. And so you can understand what they're being taught, how they're being taught, what they're looking at, what their eye progression is, et cetera, et cetera. And then for, obviously, I do more of that than help defensive coaches understand offense because I have a defensive background. But I've done game planning. I've done niche game planning. A couple of years ago, I did it for a team that needed ideas for one set of offensive personnel. They were doing a set of plays, and I created a plan for them, and it ended up it's a part of their package, and it's gone on all over college football. The fun part is it's like being a grandparent. That's the best way I can describe it. So I get to have all the fun, and then I don't have to deal with the bullshit. So I'm like, okay, hope this works out for you. And I turn my camera off and I go about my day. I don't have to worry about the scoreboard anymore. I mean, I guess I do if I want to get hired again, but I've done comprehensive game plans for like a whole week. I've done these little segments. And so that's what I'm doing. I also have like a film library for coaches. Yeah, that's really it.
So I have to ask Cullen first, like, any questions about that? This is one of those things where until you meet somebody who's doing this, you don't really step back and think about the cottage industry around every business in the world. Have you ever met anybody who does anything like this?
No, I mean, I'm jealous of the grandparenting.
I know.
I have a 3 and a 5-year-old, and oh my God, these girls like run circles around me all day long right now. I feel like life is so exhausting with little kids. It's unbelievable. But no, I mean, I'm kind of curious, like, there's a lot that resonates with what Vass is talking about, in the sense that, like, I, in a sort of indirect capacity, view myself in a lot of ways as like a teacher. And it sounds like Vass is, I don't want to call you a teacher, but in a lot of ways,
sorry to cut you off. So I got my credential. I didn't end up teaching for my first 6 years in coaching. I worked at a nonprofit startup in I say the Silicon Valley. It is technically, but then I moved to Fresno in 2018, and I was a teacher. I taught for 2 years, or a year and a half, and then my mom passed away, so I had to move back, kind of an emergency situation. But I was 100% a teacher. So you are right on the money.
Oh, all right. So I didn't know that, but no, that's, I mean, I love that, because I mean, I didn't mean to imply that like teacher was like a derogatory term, because frankly, I think that, like, I think teaching
it's a compliment.
Yeah, teaching is one of the most admirable, like, when you, especially like, it's a sign of an expertise, basically, that once you get to a point where you can teach people things, it means that you have valuable information, obviously, to pass on. And that's a weird one for me, actually, to sort of digest, because like I feel like my career through finance in a lot of ways was me almost being like an imposter of a teacher in some capacity, where I felt like, especially early on in my career, I didn't really know the things that I was necessarily talking about. And a lot of it was me sort of learning through experience. Cause like I didn't get a master's in economics or a master's in finance. And so I didn't build up this knowledge base through which I could then, kind of give it to other people. In a lot of ways, I learned primarily through experience and just interacting with other market practitioners and other economists and learning a lot of these things along the way, to the point where I now kind of feel like I'm able to call myself a teacher in some capacity, but I come from this very different perspective where like I don't have like formal training as a teacher. So, I went through this like imposter syndrome for a long time, where I was like, am I really the credible person to be even, telling people how something like quantitative easing actually works? Or am I a fraud about all this stuff?
What about you, Vass? Did you go through that? Did you go through that same cycle of imposter syndrome on the way to being able to teach what you teach now?
No, it's different because I learned directly from a coach who was, and by the way, to your point, the two greatest compliments that you can give a football coach in the football world is, one, you guys play really hard, because that's a direct reflection of you, and two, you're a great teacher. So that I did not take that as any kind of when people say, oh, you're a teacher, I take that as a compliment. I didn't have the imposter syndrome, and this was because I learned from one of the best directly. My mentor, his name's Keith Burns. He's had more influence on me than probably any human, including both of my parents, if I'm being honest. Not to go Dr. Phil or anything, but I learned directly from him, and I was like, okay, he's this good. If I just say what he says, then I'll be fine. And so I had that confidence behind me that I don't think anybody in my normal situation, I didn't have that in other situations, but I was like, well, I learned from the best. And if I just say what he says, then I'm going to be good. Not in any sort of arrogance, but I never felt like, am I saying the right thing? Cause I literally, my first year in football, I filmed practice. I filmed the end zone shot. So in football, coaches get a sideline shot, so like how we were watching on TV, and then you get the end zone shot from behind, so you can see the lineman. I filmed the end zone of practice. Well, his drills, it was kind of serendipitous. His drills were right underneath my lift. And so every day I would take an extra practice script and I would write down everything he said, and then I would type it into a Word document, and then I would do it by kind of topic. And I just memorized that. And I memorized everything he said. And so my first year coaching was literally like I was Chat GP Keith Burns, and I just spit out whatever he said. And then as I got comfortable, I started saying stuff that I had learned and I believed in. So no, I didn't have it in that part. Now with the consulting I did, but it's one of those things. It's like, it's immediate feedback, because what you tell somebody something and then they go teach it to their kids. I'm like, wow, it was really good. Or, hey, I messed up that thing. And I was channeling all the stuff I learned from Keith and all that stuff along the way. So I never had it like that on a day-to-day basis. But when I worked with some of these NFL teams, I was like, I got to work with, it's part of the deal. I can't really talk about specifics, but I got to work with some of the 2 or 3 of the top 5 minds in defense, college, pros, whatever. That was where I guess I would have had it. I was like, I was comfortable with what I was saying, but I was like, what am I doing here? So I guess that part of it, yeah. I didn't really think of it that way though.
All right. So this is a not spoiling part of why I brought you here, but I want you both to give me a little something on this. And Cullen, for you and the imposter syndrome, I know you and I have talked a little bit about this in the past before too. I feel like there's all sorts of macroeconomics when you're probably in a little bit of that imposter syndrome phase, like around the financial crisis, right after 2009, 10, 11, 12 through. Is that part of the era? Like, how confident were you feeling in your own abilities and knowledge in that era? Or in your writing Pragmatic Capitalism and that stuff?
Well, I think that's I think part of maturing, especially in the world of finance and economics, is understanding that this is not a hard science. This is a world that is very behaviorally driven, where you're, even when you think that the sort of underlying first principles are all exactly right, behavior can change all of that. And so the likelihood of you still being wrong, even when you think you have all of the pieces lined up, is still relatively high. So it's a really humbling world, in the sense that you can have this like really, really precise understanding of everything. And for instance, like if you have this really precise understanding of how much Nvidia is worth today, well, if the rest of the market doesn't eventually agree with your understanding, your knowledge is virtually irrelevant, because the market will then determine what the future price of this thing is. So you can have this like sort of first principles understanding of things where it leads you to a certain conclusion, and you still need the rest of the market to agree with your conclusions in the long run. And so it's a really humbling world in that sense, in that the likelihood of you being wrong very, very often is just super high. And so it's not quite as, it's not sort of as black and white as, getting a first down or something like that, where you kind of know like the building blocks for achieving these certain things, because the behavior in the world of finance and economics can be so ambiguous and unknown that it, in a lot of ways, it makes economics more like psychiatry, basically. And that's the screwy thing, is that when you try to understand economics, you can't understand economics without also understanding the psychology of all the drivers of the economics. And so I think that's the thing that, especially back then, I was very uncomfortable with, was that, and God, the current political situation is such a great example of this, where like coming out of school, like I remember studying tariffs and things like that in great detail at times. And this is, in terms of economics, this is about as black and white as a policy that any economist learns about. But then you get somebody in political power who disagrees with that and is using these things in a certain way that is very different than, say, traditional economics might have framed it. And there's certain shreds of truth to a lot of what's being done. There's also a lot of bullshit around what's being done, but there are certain shreds of truth where you're kind of like, oh, I always learned that this was like the most black and white policy in the world. And now I'm sort of looking at it and I'm like, okay, yes, I have to spend a lot of time understanding this and analyzing this and debunking certain elements of this, because there's actually a lot of shreds of truth to what is being said and being done. And so, that's a great example of something where, you can have all the most basic first principles in the world outlined, and they can be as black and white as they come. And then the politics and the behavior around all of this just says, nope, that's all wrong.
I have can I jump in? I got a couple questions. So you mentioned something about the predictions, or not predictions. That's my question. You mentioned something about, well, what you think something is worth. It doesn't matter if it doesn't agree with you. And you've said a lot of things along the way about behavioral stuff. And so I bought a bunch of books on investing. I may be bearing the lead here or
No,
whatever.
dive in.
I am in the process of, I'm finishing launching a new business. I built a business and I'm not talking my book here because I don't think anybody on this podcast is ever, unless you're a high school football coach and needs a new defensive system, I'm your guy. But if not, I didn't want you to think I'm doing like product placement. But anyway, after I finish this business, I've been inspired by a lot of people. Where I first saw you was with the guys at the Compound, Ritholtz, doing interviews, and they've inspired me. So my first books weren't Jack Bogle and all these other things. It was all the behavioral stuff. So I got this Weig book, Morgan Housel. That's where I started. And what's funny about this is the thread that runs through this. And there's a couple things you said that made me trip on this. Is they always say nobody knows anything, nobody knows the future, but also we have to make a bunch of predictions because that's the business we're in. But predictions are useless, but we still have to make them. So my question to you is, and somebody in this world, because I make a point, I don't make predictions. So when I do, people kind of like, not that I'm some important voice here, but like if I make a prediction on something, they're like, oh shit, he really believes this. Because I don't like being embarrassed in public in that realm. So it's fascinating to talk to people like you, Cullen, who are in this world, which I'm guessing if you've mentioned some of the names where you're like, nobody knows what's going to happen. Very few people know where this is going to happen. Black swan events. But also I have to make predictions that I don't really want to make. How much of that do you have to do in your world? And how do you deal with that?
I embrace it. I think that like it actually, it's one of my sort of pet peeves when I hear somebody say, "Oh, don't make any forecasts about anything,"
Sure.
or ignore people who make predictions and forecasts. Because I mean, life inevitably requires prediction, and especially like when you work from a financial planning foundation, by definition, you have to make all sorts of assumptions and predictions about what's going to transpire in the future. Like, I mean, you have to predict what the stock and bond market returns are likely to be. You have to predict what future inflation is likely to be. You have all these inputs that you have to make sort of implicit assumptions about. And what a lot of people do, which is funny with the stock market, is they implement what's basically called extrapolative expectations predictions, which means that all they do is they look at the past and then they extrapolate all that going forward. And they say,
That's the bad part.
The stock market has done, 7% real returns over the last 100 years. And so that's a safe assumption. And I think that that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But I think that part of that process should involve you embracing the reality that, hey, you're making a prediction. You're making a forecast about the future. It's a pretty smart one based on a lot of history, a lot of data, but you still are making a forecast. And I think that like what a lot of us do is like what I do very specifically is I embrace that. And then kind of, I do more actively try to make a rational forecast about a lot of things. Like because there are certain things that you can, I think, somewhat reliably predict going forward. Like you don't want to just look at the bond market, for instance, and say, well, the bond market has done 5% for the last 40 years. And so we can assume that going forward, the bond market will do, the same number. But a big part of that is the fact that, well, wait a minute, over the last 40, 50 years, interest rates were falling the whole time. So the bond market was in a lot of ways like this sort of anomaly in the last 40 to 50 years in terms of its total returns. And you can look at the bond market today and say, okay, the likelihood of this repeating is very low because the starting interest rate is so much different than it is. So you can look at things and say, with a certain degree of forecasting predictability, what are the likely outcomes? And that's really, that's ultimately what you're trying to do is you're trying to look at things through a sort of like probabilistic lens where you're then saying, okay, well, I know I have a historical background in what this has generated or what inflation has done or, XYZ. But now I'm applying a sort of probabilistic outcome going forward based on the current environment, current valuations, current interest rates, whatever it might be, and then sort of applying that on top of this sort of backwards looking extrapolative expectations perspective where you are to a large degree embracing the fact that you have to make predictions. And it's not that much different than, coaching in the sense that you have to inevitably predict what is the other team going to try to do over the course of the next few plays. And you have to, probabilistically map out, okay, well, if this sequence of events plays out, what is the team going to respond with in this environment? And, so to me, it's one of these things where a lot of people, I think, confuse extrapolative expectations forecasts with just the reality that, hey, we're all making forecasts. There are smart ways to make forecasts and there are really stupid ways to make forecasts. And I just sort of embrace the reality that, hey, I like to think I'm making smart probabilistic based forecasts, but I'm absolutely 100% always trying to predict what the future of the financial world and the economy is going to look like because you have to by necessity.
So I'm going to take my foot out of my mouth then, because I guess what I've ascertained from these is like these people that go on TV and say, the S&P is going to hit this and that's that. And like with just not, it's going to be, our target says 7,000. Done. And you're like, and then like, what was that? What was that?
Stupid prediction.
And then
That's I was
I
putting
guess
that in the
I'll
stupid prediction bucket.
my foot halfway out of my
So-
mouth there.
Because
Why is it stupid? No, tell us why it's stupid. Explain this.
you can look at these things through, I think, proper time horizons. Like the stock market returns on a 1-year basis are basically a coin flip, predicting what the stock market is going to do. Like the probability of a positive versus negative return on any given 12-month rolling basis is approximately, it's like 49% or something. It's a literal coin flip. And so when I see people who come out with 1-year forecasts and these very sort of short-term predictions about the stock market, especially like these sorts of day trading shows you might see on, financial TV and things like that, it is pure entertainment value, in my opinion. And nobody knows really what the stock market is going to consistently do on a daily, monthly, or even annual basis. And that's one of the things that you can look at the past data and then you can extrapolate it out and you can ascertain that, hey, actually over a 10-year rolling period, the probability of the stock market generating a positive return is like 90%. And so you can start to look at this thing through time and say, okay, well, based on this time horizon, I feel confident saying that the stock market is going to generate XYZ return. But again, like that's a time-based prediction relative to a certain asset that, like the stock, I think the stock market is this instrument that really is, it's a behavioral cluster for people because it's an inherently long-term instrument. Corporations are inherently long-term entities in the sense that it takes a long time to build Apple into what Apple has become. Like by the time any entity even enters something like the S&P 500, that entity has already been around on average something like 20 plus years. So these are old companies. We call them initial public offerings, but really these initial public offerings happen for companies that are actually very old on average. And so the stock market is this inherently long-term instrument that because it's so volatile and you can trade it instantaneously, I think a lot of people view it as this very short-term instrument. And that's one of the behavioral hurdles with it, is that, like I always tell people that one of the best things you can do to improve your performance is probably to lose your brokerage password. Because the less you look at what the stock market is doing, the better your performance is likely to be, just because you're not going to succumb to losing the loser's game by, making these big behavioral mistakes, because the stock market gets scary in the short term. That's just what the stock market does.
It's the fidelity study, right? Like the two best performing people was people that lost their passwords to people that died.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
Which there's some crazy myth to that study. The dead one. They like debunked that a few years ago, and that broke my heart. So I was like, that's so fun to talk about. All right, wait.
Grenade in here, Matt?
Throw a grenade.
Go ahead and finish your point. I'm sorry.
No, I think this idea of the nuance, and I'll interject this piece of nuance into it too. There's a lot of times where you have to respect that the person on TV who says this is the statement and then blank. A lot of times those are still smart people. And if you can take them out of that environment, it's the environment that's taking their message and truncating that. And I've been endlessly fascinated by people where I'm like, that guy's a joke, or that person's a joke, or this is whatever. And then you actually see them talk, or you read something and you're like, oh, they're thoughtful. This is just a horrible medium, and that's why you shouldn't consume this type of media.
Right.
You've got a newfound interest in all this stuff, though. So I'm fascinated by your brain as like not a 20-year-old who's interested in this stuff, but somebody with some life experience starting to digest all this. So hand grenade away. I'm really curious what you're thinking here.
Well, this is kind of not in that vein.
That's okay. That's why it's a hand grenade, a holy hand grenade.
And
Pull that pin.
You can edit this out and put a stop to this and just be like, all right, we're done here. We're moving on. But
I love that challenge.
I have a question here. They say not to get political in investing, right? Which I understand. Don't let your politics guide your portfolio. However, let's go back to the tariff thing. This is inherently political. this idea that we're going to tariff the world, and it's a political motive by a guy who has said this for 30 or 40 years, has had this view. And what drives me nuts, and maybe it's just the medium, is I turn on the television, which again, might be my first mistake, I understand, but I turn on, because I love Josh Brown, so whenever he's on CNBC, that's my guy, I watch it. And they'll be like, Donald Trump, and we're speaking specifically to the tariffs, okay? I don't want to go, because I don't want to turn it into that. But they'll be like, not to get political. We don't want to get political here. We're not a political show. And then roll the political grenade out, and then they'll cut to somebody standing outside the White House talking about the president, but not to get political. We don't want to get political here. But this political guy, the top politician in the world, did something really political that's really politically stupid. But we can't get political. This is not a political show. I don't understand that, and it drives me fucking nuts. Can you please put some color, both of you, on this? Because it makes me insane. Here's what I've learned in this world, and I'm a couple of years I've been studying this. Basically, what ended up happening, my ADHD brain jumped around. I'm starting to tell you that I started this business. When I'm done with it, I want to become an advisor. Like I did in a lot of my life, I asked coaches, hey, what do you do for your retirement? What do you do for this? And everybody's like, I don't know, I have a guy. And I started realizing that there's an opportunity to help a lot of people that I've been helping in a different way. So anyway, I've been studying this, and and you said about the tariffs. So I was a poli-sci major. We learned about tariffs in poli-sci. So it's not even just like economics. It's a bad idea. It's a very bad idea. And the only people that agree with it are stupid or politically dishonest. That's what I've come to learn. That's what they say, not what I say. I don't know enough, so send your hate mail somewhere else. But this idea that this guy is doing this as a populist political message that no one agrees with, except a couple of lackeys, but we can't make it political. I don't understand it. Why can't we make it political? It's a political move.
Good,
Am I
Cullen.
crazy?
How do you think about this or talk about it, knowing that you have a lot of nuanced thoughts on tariffs? So answer this how you think.
Oh, his thoughts aren't nuanced. I listen, when it comes to tariffs, I listen. This guy is
Yeah,
fantastic. And
I know.
He calls out a lot of these charlatans about it, and that's why I like him, because he doesn't put up with the bullshit. I've seen so many smart people just turn completely stupid over this stuff. And it's somebody who doesn't really know anything. I know enough to know this is bad, and I'm watching people that have managed money for as long as I've been alive be like, tariffs are good. We like tariffs. It's time for Main Street's turn, not Wall Street's turn, and all this bullshit. Sorry.
This one's really, I mean, I don't know. This is another thing that for better or worse, I kind of embrace the reality that, especially with economics, there's so much politics involved in all of this stuff. Like I've spent an egregious amount of time talking about like the national debt in the last, my entire career, basically. Cause like a lot of my work revolves around bonds, and especially US government bonds. And so by virtue of that, I end up getting, a lot of clients throw me grenades about the US government debt time bomb and stuff like that. And so I'm constantly fielding questions about this sort of stuff that is inherently political. And I don't know, I kind of run towards it in a lot of ways, just in the sense that I focus on it in a very, I try to focus on it from a very fact-based, sort of evidence-based perspective, where I can look at something and say, okay, is debt inherently bad? Well, no, we know that's BS. And is the US government's debt currently a huge problem in the context of the US economy and inflation and all these other factors that are important that are outside of the general political narratives of all this stuff? And so I approach this stuff from more of like that sort of operational reality perspective, where I try to remove the politics from it all, but also knowing that these items are inherently political. And so, I mean, the tariff one is really, it's especially frustrating because the basic problem with tariffs is that they're anti-competitive. And so from just a very, very basic, like fundamentals of economics perspective, we generally say, well, more competition is good, and more competition will result in lower prices, and better growth and all of these things that are really, I think, in the evidence of what tariffs have also done over the course of the last, that free trade has achieved over the course of the last 40 to 50 years, that the United States has actually become an incredibly wealthy, prosperous country in large part because we've embraced free trade and competition and these things that are very sort of the essence of capitalism in a lot of ways. So this one's especially frustrating for me because what we're seeing now is the political party that has traditionally been the party of capitalism and free markets is now embracing this position that is very anti-free trade, very anti-capitalist, which to me is just sort of, it's kind of more confusing than anything else to me, that because I'm not, and I try not to be hyper political. I mean, I'm very moderate. Like I actually, like the way that I vote is almost, it's very inherently apolitical because like I always vote for Republicans and Democrats. Like I'll look at the three branches of government and I apply this, again, sort of like almost overly zealous, like first principles application of this, where I'm saying, well, the founding fathers wanted us to have to come together. They wanted checks and balances on the different branches of government so that we had to work together. And so I actually apply that to the way that I vote, in the sense that when I know that one party is going to win something, I might actually vote with that party just because I already know they're going to win. But if I know that something's close, like if I know that the House is going to be close and my vote in California for a Republican might actually swing things so that there's a check, I'll literally vote for the Republican, because I think that my vote actually can make a difference, in the sense that we can create a check that will result in the country having to work together. And I think that this is sort of one of the big problems with the political world today, is that we've gotten into this situation where we don't even work together anymore. And we actually are sort of boomeranging back and forth. The pendulum keeps swinging from extreme to extreme, where, now the Republicans have all the control and they're going to do a bunch of bullshit that the other side just hates all of. And what's going to happen is that in 4 years or in 8 years, the pendulum's going to swing the other way, where we all get fed up and we're like, oh, this isn't working. This is a bunch of bullshit. And we're all going to vote in nothing but Democrats. And then the Democrats come in and they do the exact opposite. And they're going to do a bunch of stuff that, Bernie Sanders is in love with, that the moderates all hate. And it's going to piss off all the moderate Democrats and the moderate Republicans. And they're all going to vote for the Republicans the next time around. And so we've gotten into this world where, like, we don't agree on stuff because the system in a lot of ways isn't working in a way that forces us to agree the way that it was really designed to work. That's kind of the beauty of the American system in a lot of ways, is that we were always forced to agree through compromise, and that doesn't happen to a large degree anymore. So I mean, that to me is sort of one of the big problems. But I don't even know where I'm going with the tangent now, but it's all inherently political. And I think that the fact that people try to dismiss that or ignore it is similar to the way that people try to ignore the whole forecasting thing, that it's like, no, like, stop sugarcoating it. Stop BSing everybody about what we're doing here. This is inherently political. There's nothing wrong with politics. And more importantly, like, if your feelings get hurt over the reality that tariffs are bad, then you're too fucking sensitive about everything that's going on, because you're letting all of your behavioral biases just get in the way of the reality of what these things are likely to do and what the outcomes are. So, stop being so sensitive about all the politics of this and just try to understand the world for what it is and what we're actually doing here. And you can look at this and you can be critical of your own team, knowing that, hey,
Yes.
we might actually make our team stronger through being critical of our own team.
Yeah. You'd think that's how it would work. I have a whole, I don't want to, this is because this is going to go way off the rails on this. That is one of the best things that anybody has said on this topic, is this idea. We have lost the idea. I think we've been you know what? Fuck it. I think we've been segmented in our society, and we don't have enough cool shit going on in our lives that we identify, because we don't have a lot of other things to identify with. I'm not saying we as like a collective. So now, instead of being like, oh, I'm a tennis guy, or I'm a golf guy, or I'm a this, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat. And it's like, if you criticize an idea, you're criticizing my identity, which is just so asinine and just dumb. And the idea that you could be like, yeah, I love the gotcha games. Well, your side did this. Yeah, they did. And they were stupid, and I didn't like that too. And then people are like, what? You can't say that. It's like, no, I don't think it's good that we just say whatever. I mean, but whatever. I'm going to shut the hell up because I'm fired up. And we're going to talk about stuff that I don't want to talk about because it's going to piss me off.
Don't shut the hell up, because I want this perspective too, because I think this is one of those through lines that I know I obsess over, and I think both of you do in different ways. So Vass, like you're starting this new business, you're thinking about this new venture of going the advisory route, but you're also setting up this core business. Does tariffs or any of this stuff enter the equation at all in any of your personal business making or personal life decisions? Or do tariffs only matter as a topic du jour out in the world around you?
It matters if it matters to clients, or I am advising was a totally different world, but like what I'm doing is probably going to be one of the first to go, football, fun stuff. Now, I know that there are some people that the schools take care of the payment for some of this. So maybe it's a little different, but like if the tariffs start leading to layoffs and all this, the worst case scenario, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, then I might be the first thing that's cut. So it's an existential threat, but it's not like it's going to directly affect costs or anything. I mean, I sell some merchandise on my website that's like, I make like $2 on because it's all custom. I may break even, which I don't care. I mean, that's not what it's there for. It's more for fun, but not direct impacts really. But if people get afraid, then maybe.
Yeah, and that's like the bigger existential thought. But it's like with these things, and Cullen, how do you think about this? Sometimes until it's part of our tangible reality, it's really fun to talk parlor room stuff about. But I find a lot of people having a hard time connecting any of this to actual tangible reality aside from eggs, which you apparently have an abundance of. So if that was I'm rich flex, good on you. But I know it wasn't. I'm so rich, my eggs are rotting on my kitchen counter.
Really sold it there, by the way.
I know. I wish I was getting rich from my eggs. The hilarious thing about eggs and having chickens is that it's definitely, maybe not definitely, but it is at best a break-even sort of endeavor.
Welcome farming in general, right?
I mean, and actually, like, chicken feed got really, really expensive in the last couple years. So like, there's no way. I mean, it's not like I'm like maintaining chickens all day or something. So it's not like it's a lot of work, or the labor expenses aren't enormous, but it's definitely not a money-making endeavor. So it's more of like it's a cute hobby. It's like gardening. I'm so bad at gardening, and I plant like all these plants. I'll spend hundreds of dollars on plants actually. And you spend months and months watering them and pouring more money into them literally. And then you get like 10 tomatoes at the end of the season. And you're like, they're the 10 best tomatoes you'll ever eat. But it's still like, you're a jackass if you think that you're like making money from this or something, or some sort of like sustainable endeavor or self-sustaining endeavor. So, I mean, for me, like with the tariff stuff, it's sort of weird that like the interesting thing with tariffs specifically is that we actually haven't had like a big tangible impact, in the sense that we haven't actually implemented the tariffs really to a large degree.
We've talked about tariffs a lot.
We've wasted a ton of brain space on all this stuff. And the revenue from tariffs has increased, pretty significantly, but it's still, in terms of like the federal government's total tax receipts, like it's a very, very small number still. And then you have the announcement, last night that the federal court, overturned the tariff. So like, we don't even know, like, are the tariffs even happening, or are they all going to transform into like the different, sectional tariffs now, where, because he still has the authority to implement like the 203 tariffs and all this other stuff. So who knows? But that's the other thing, is that like, even with the the actual trade lag of all this stuff, like there's a huge temporal effect in all of this, is that we put the delays on. It takes a long time for a boat to get from China to the United States in the first place. And so there's huge lags in all this. Like at best, we won't even see a lot of this actually start to show up in any material way in the data until like Q2, Q3 maybe. So I don't know. Like it's, again, like making predictions about this one is even harder because not only is the data super laggy, but the guy driving the car is kind of, can't decide what direction he wants to go in. So nobody knows. And that's the kind of the worst part about it to a lot of people, is that it's just the uncertainty of it all is like, it's like, oh God, can't we just tell me what, the price of a hat from China is going to cost, so that I can at least like run my hat business in a way where, I know where to set prices in the future. So
easy to say, hard to do. I'm pulling the hand grenades back out of your hands, Chris. So just embrace this.
Well, it's well deserved.
It's well deserved. I've got some notes. I want to go through some of the stuff that you guys said leading up to this. Back at the beginning, Cullen, and you've said this a couple of times. Do you feel like you've re-tapped back into some of the artistic streak that you wanted to have? Actually, no, I'm asking Chris this. Vass, do you think that Cullen's tapped into any of his creative streak? You see him out there on the social medias and the interwebs bumbling around. Do you think he's an artistic marketing guy at heart? Do you see it?
He's an artistic tweeter. He takes on, what I like about Cullen is he doesn't care. So I'm coming from the outside, so I don't have any preconceived notions of who like you have to genuflect to and the business and who you can go after. And I caught myself in a couple Twitter spats with, I guess, some big dogs. I don't give a shit because I'm not in this world. But thing I like about Cullen is it doesn't matter who he's talking to. First of all, he's a great tweeter, crafting his message, but I like how he tells truth to power. I mean, I've seen it. I'm trying to remember. There's one I'm specifically talking about. I think there was something with Barry. There was a tweet with Barry Weiss that said something. You're like, no, this is bullshit. You were talking about something, and then some big name. I know this is a great story. I can't remember the names, but you know what I'm talking about. Cullen's been recently, and then you had a bunch of people coming in and being like, "That's not right. That's not right." And you're like, "No, this is the data." You know what I'm referring to? Please say yes. Please say yes. Please say yes.
I don't know.
You were talking about the tariffs. There was some sort of protection.
It was probably Mike Green. It was probably the conversation with Mike Green.
So the Mike Green and Cliff has
this one. That's one of the guys I went after.
Yeah, Cliff.
Yeah,
Cliff had my back.
Yes, he did.
That made me real happy. Cliff,
nice feeling.
Cliff is one of those guys on Twitter where when you get support from Cliff Asness, it's like, I tweeted that like a meme of me in a Spider-Man outfit being carried by Captain America, which is that's what it feels like when Cliff Asness comes to the rescue on Twitter.
Yeah,
because he will body you.
Oh, if you're wrong.
About a guy who really like I try to be sort of like overly kind to people on Twitter because the internet is such a cesspool of, horrible interactions that, I grew up, you guys probably did too, in the days of the AOL chat rooms. And I'm still scarred in a lot of ways by what I saw there, but I learned in the AOL chat rooms that, there is a line that you don't cross when you talk to people. And so I kind of I saw so many, terrible interactions back then that it was like, I was like, it's not even worth it. We're all the meme of the guy arguing late at night when his wife, saying, come to bed, honey. And it's like, there's somebody losing an argument on the internet. And it's like, this isn't worth the effort. But, so I've kind of learned to be almost overly I don't want to say dismissive, but kind to people in a way where I can just be like, you called me an asshole. And I honestly, I don't care that you called me an asshole. I will actually do not care. But yeah, the Mike Green one was, that's one of those situations where it's like, I really, really like Mike. And like, we know each other in person, and people probably see us on Twitter and they're like, oh, these two guys don't like each other. And it's like, that's not true. Or just,
You're just looking in the wrong comments. You got to find one where they're trading cooking tips.
Part of this. And that's the thing that is also very annoying about Mike is very, very nuanced in the way that he thinks about certain things. And Mike won't say that passive investing is bad as a whole, but Mike has a big beef with passive investing in a very nuanced sense. And when you get into that debate with him, he will body you on it because he knows so much about it. And he's got data to back up his evidence and, all that stuff. But he has very, very nuanced views. And that's, kind of going back to what we were talking about again, that like with the generalization of a lot of the views on this stuff, that people don't take the time to look through the generalizations to the nuance of this and try to understand the nuance in somebody else's argument where you can actually find points of agreement. Like with the tariff people, I think that people who really like tariffs, they really are, I think, misinterpreting the causality of this in the sense that like the U.S. economy does have big problems. There are problems that need to be solved. And a lot of those stem from things like inequality or bad regulations. And so I can talk to a really hardcore Trump advocate and I can find a point of agreement where I can say, okay, well, you know what? We actually agree that inequality is bad. It's driven a wedge in our society in a way that is a huge problem now that needs to be solved. And what has caused that to some degree? Well, like I would say housing regulations are a huge problem in this country that have contributed to inequality. They've made houses unaffordable for a lot of young people. And that's something that we can both agree on, that we should all be able to find a point of agreement about to then start focusing on a solution. And so those are the sorts of things that I think people don't do enough of. They just make these blanket statements where they say like, oh, the tariffs are good or the tariffs are bad. And you don't look for any of the nuance in any of this and try to find a point of agreement where you can then say, okay, well, now we can start getting towards a reasonable solution about all this because we actually find points of agreement about it. So it's sort of just a lot of it is this sloppy generalizations and the politicization of a lot of this stuff that results in sort of lazy conclusions and lazy policies.
Vass, you're making this transition, and I'm curious on what it means to you to be going from something where there was clear scoreboards, who wins, loses games and stuff like that, into thinking about life. And I'm carrying this point of nuance from what Cullen was just saying. Does it scare you? Is it intimidating to look at something where the scoreboard's not as clear? Like if you move towards finance, if you move towards a total life switch? Or do you see a different scoreboard? Is there even...
I don't see so part of, I don't mean to get nerdy here, but...
I'm asking you to get nerdy specifically in this question.
This is overly... I hate this. I don't like, mindless tropes. But one of them is, and a lot of it comes from sports, is the trust the process. I think the reason I hate it is because the Sixers tanked for years and then said trust the process, and then there was no process. So then people used it as like a pejorative. But yeah, the scoreboard's what you're measured against, but we never talked, when I was at Sarah, we didn't talk about winning. We didn't talk about outcomes. So the scoreboard was the judge. I didn't worry about that as much because if we did what we did, we took care of business, and we could shut out a team, but if our offense doesn't score, it doesn't matter anyway. So like there's a kind of, I do my job, you do yours sort of thing. So I never really looked at it like that. The thing that's exciting to me about becoming an advisor is you get to make your own scoreboard, and you get to know someone. And from what I can gather and my work being with Ritholtz as a client is we created a scoreboard together. They said, what do you want? And that target can move. That's the other thing that's great. It's a lot more forgiving. So the lack of a clear scoreboard, I think it's great because some people want to save. Like I know one of your partners, Jack Forehand, he always talks about the thing that he wanted to do is he wanted to get a boat. He bought a boat. I know he always asks people, what have you bought that's not like great financial sense, and he talks about his boat. Well, that was one of his goals. And I think it's awesome that he's been able to do that. Somebody's boat, somebody's scoreboard could be, if my child gets to an Ivy and doesn't get a scholarship, it's paid for, or whatever the most expensive college you can imagine. That's what's cool, is creating the scoreboard together. Well, helping them create their own scoreboard and then being able to achieve that for them. I think that's really what inspires me. And that's the fact that like 2 years ago when I started doing this on my own, I didn't know how to even, I didn't know where to screw the scoreboard. I didn't know where the stadium was. Like, I didn't know, if we're using this metaphor, I'm like, where do you even go? In the fact that I've learned enough to find somebody who's great at this, that I can model and then help people find what I found and the path that I'm on, coming from nothing. I mean, nothing. And you know a little bit about my story, where I came from and how little I knew. So that's what I'm really excited about, is creating that and working with people individually to create that. Again, I'm bludgeoning the metaphor, but the scoreboard and the path.
I love the way that you're thinking about that. I really do. I think that's really special. I think it goes back to a lot of the points Cullen was making earlier. Cullen, I want you to reflect on this thing that Vass said about correct me, was it the two biggest compliments you give a coach were you play hard and that you're a good teacher?
Yeah,
Is
your
that what
kids
those
play
were?
hard and you're a great teacher. The two of the best you can receive. Yeah.
What do you think about
Yeah,
that?
well, it's funny, especially writing a lot. Like a lot of the times when I'm writing stuff, I feel like I'm just like sending things into a void, which is a lot of, especially like with my old pragmatic capitalism content, like that stuff is kind of in like a literal void now, where it's like I published like an embarrassing number of articles over the course of whatever, 10, 15 years, something like 10,000 plus. And you know, how many 9,995 of those are just in a void now that have been ignored. But every once in a while, I get an email from somebody and they say something really, really nice. And I'm like, it makes it all worth it in this sort of like weird way, where when some stranger reaches out to you and says, you know, thank you for writing this, or, hey, I just wanted to, you don't know me, but I wanted to reach out and say like, hey, I read all your stuff, or I read, you know, some of your stuff and I love it or find it really valuable. Yeah, it's like, that's like the best thing ever. I don't know. It's like having your kid tell you they love you. It's like, you know, it's so frustrating having little kids. And then it's like, oh, they say this one cute little thing. It's like, oh, it's all worth it. So it's like, yeah, getting that like, you know, positive feedback is the best thing ever. And it kind of makes it all worthwhile in a lot of different ways.
I try to make a point to do that as a consumer, because I do podcasts and the numbers are even more obscure sometimes. Like with I own a website, so you get they're like, hey, 40 people visited you today. Did you know that 65 people visited you, sir? I'm like, yeah, I got it, thank you. But when you do podcasting, it's very simple. Like you don't know what you're getting, and so what's kind of opened some doors. Why I'm even here today is because I reached out to Matt and I was like, you've inspired me to make this crazy career change. And I get what I've gathered so far is people in your world don't see a lot of people like me that look like me, that were football coaches. And so I think people like Cliff, the same thing. I emailed Cliff. I messaged you, Cullen. I just want to say, and not even asking for anything, I just want to say thank you. You inspired me. And that led to a meeting with AQR, and they were talking, like he made sure that 2 people met with me just to talk to me about AQR stuff, and it's opened all these doors. And it's because as a podcaster, I don't know why I use Conan as this example, but I listen to Conan's podcast all the time, but I've never emailed him and said, hey, Conan, great job with Jim Downey, really learned a lot.
One of my favorite episodes, just for the record.
Right. So like you don't know what you're doing, and then you get those emails every once in a while. And that's when I knew it was time to step away. I'd already started going to that before my mom got sick. But I remember we were in a playoff game and we were favored by a lot. We won the game, and it was one of those things like we knew we were going to win. We were just happy nobody got hurt. And I came off the sideline and I checked my phone and I just started doing a podcast. And I got a DM saying, I just want to thank you. We just won the first playoff game in the school history in like 25 years. And if it wasn't for you, I don't know if this could have made happen. this would have happened, which I was way too generous of a compliment. But I remember the joy that I felt from reading that was 10 times that of the team I just coached to a victory. And that's when I was kind of like, okay, maybe I can have more of an impact, because coaching is enriching and you fundamentally help shape the lives of young men, and a lot of them every year. But the reach that you're able to have with what you do, Cullen, versus just meeting with one person, and what you do, Matt, because but we're all in this world, right? We all meet with people individually, and we've had these individual relationships where you get to know somebody at depth. But to acknowledge the amount of breadth and lives that you affect, most of which you don't even know, they're data numbers and points. And when you get those messages, it makes it all worthwhile. And it's not even the actual compliment itself. It's just like, wow, this is actually helping. Because you know, I've told Matt, when you do a podcast, it's the most anticlimactic thing in the world. You have this great guest on this great interview, and you're like, wow. And then you hit stop, you edit it, and you send it out, and you're like, new podcast out. And then nothing. It's not like you're at a game where you call a great blitz and you sack the quarterback and everybody shit. The feedback is beyond delayed. And unless I'll release an episode with a couple thousand listens, and I might get one message or one DM or somebody mentions it in passing. And so that's what's so fun about this, is the range that you have in me. Colin, you had no idea who I was until this meeting, and I lit up like a Christmas tree when I saw it was you. So that's the impact that you have on people. And I've only been reading for a couple months. Like, this isn't even like, imagine the reaction I would have had if I'd been for a couple years. So anyway.
Keep reading my stuff. I'll piss you off at some point.
I'm sure.
It's inevitable.
The Twitter fight is just waiting to happen. Just look at you.
It's all Colin. I'm a cliff. So like, I don't care.
We're butt heads on Twitter before you know it.
Because there's there's a really influential voice who you've had on multiple shows, who had a tweet over Memorial Day weekend that was insane. And I lost it. And I was just like, are you serious? And this guy is like Mount Rushmore of asset allocation. And then I'm like, I don't know if maybe I'm cut out for this world, that here's this guy that's really influential but he said something completely insane, and I couldn't help myself. So I need a little bit more Cullen in my life, that calming AOL chat room angel.
AOL chat room angel.
They can swat you.
They can swat you. I like to think of it all as I just look at everything and I think it's Calvin Ball. Like, where it's just, these are like, if you remember Calvin Ball from Calvin and Hobbes, it's just where he would make up arbitrary rules the whole time. Yeah. And I just look at the world and I look at life and I'm like, oh, this guy's playing Calvin Ball right now. That's all this is. This is some temporary universal rule that they are applying in the world as they see it. And it's just best to accept everybody's playing Calvin Ball. And I'll go back to my corner and try to smile. It's time to play this game. Cullen, you go first. Take a wild guess. What did I put on the back of my card here? Why did I want to introduce you to Vass here?
Because he's a teacher of fundamentals that is applying it in a way that is really useful to people.
I love that. Vass, what do you think? Why did I want you to introduce you to Cullen?
Because you think Cullen could be a good mentor for me.
You're both very close and probably beating around the exact same thing. So I said, learning, leading, and coaching to win more than games. I see both of you embodying this in the work you do, and I just respect the hell out of it, because both of you will take the time to engage with that person. And actually think back to, speaking of the volumes of stuff you've written, Cullen, like how many, the comment sections on some of your posts from like 10 years ago. I remember just scrolling and being like, this guy must be responding to comments on this monetary theory post all day long. And I don't know if it's making anybody better or smarter or well off, but my God, does he care about teaching? And then Vass, same thing for you. I'll look back at some of these posts or some of these videos, and it's this language I don't even speak, but I see the passion that you want to help these people with. And if we have more people doing this stuff in the world, I think it makes it just all a better place. So I'm thrilled to introduce you to each other in this format. Absolutely. Cullen, people want to learn more. They want to bug you on the internet. Where are the best places to find you these days?
You can just read my embarrassing tweets at Cullen Roche on Twitter. And I kind of moved all my blogging material, I guess, to the Discipline Funds website under the Discipline Alerts tab. So Those are the two primary places. And keep an eye out for my book that's coming out next.
Finally,
Your
waiting for
Perfect
this.
Portfolio.
I'm excited about that.
So been working hard on that with the publishers at Harriman House, and so I'm excited. It took me 10 years to write my second book, so it's been
Congratulations.
one long in the making.
Long in the making, but once in a while, somebody takes the right amount of time to put the next banger out. What about you, Vass? People want to find you, all those high school football coaches listening or just chomping at the bit. When's he going to say it? When can I get it?
Wait.
I know.
Hear about my next zone blitz I'm going to talk about. You can follow me on Twitter at Coach Vass. There's a link tree there if you need help, if you're need any sort of materials with coaching, it's all there. If you go to I have it in the Twitter bio, and yeah, check that out. And Cullen, you actually screwed up by coming into this, because I'm going to bug the shit out of you now and be like, remember that podcast we did together? Because I think what you do is so fantastic. And I've become, the thing that really got me going was building my own portfolio. It got me on this. I'm like, well, what do I do with this? I think I can do better than these robo-advisor portfolios. And that's what really kind of grabbed me into this whole world. So you're writing a book called The Perfect Portfolio, right? Did I get that right, the title?
Your Perfect Portfolio.
Your Perfect Portfolio.
Close enough.
Even better, because it's my scoreboard, right? Tying this all together.
Yeah, and that's the cool thing. That's kind of how I framed it too, Vass, is like, and that's one thing that really resonated with me when you said that earlier, that like you have to create the portfolio that's good for you, because so much of this is, and this is one of the big behavioral problems with investing and strategies, is that people look for strategies that other people are using. Like, oh, I'm going to do what Warren Buffett does, or I'm going to implement the 60-40 portfolio. And then you realize, a couple years down the line, that you're like, oh, this doesn't really work for me, or, I need to change stuff. And it's because you didn't find the portfolio that works for you. So I wrote the book in kind of the context of like finding a spouse, that we all need to find somebody that works for us. You don't just go out and, try to find, Angelina Jolie or Heidi Klum or whoever it might be, and then, relentlessly pursue them until they succumb. You have to find, a spouse that works for you, because you think that person is someone who you get to know and works for you in a compatible way. And that's very much what portfolio management is like. And you have to customize and tweak things in a way that you find that works for you, that you can end up being, faithful to in the long run.
And there's something in there too about like the players you have on the field, proverbially speaking. This is the other thing. People will say like a 60-40 or something like that. It's like, well, or Warren Buffett. You take the pick of any of these. Your life is not their life.
Yep.
Like, you have so many different things. It's like, no. You run a plumbing business. You shouldn't think this way. You are not a venture capitalist. You can listen to All In all you want, but you and your HVAC business are not that. And being able to like normalize around that. And so like Vass, you already grasping this on the way in is a huge accelerant if you're going to pursue this business at all.
Okay, so I know we're in the outros part, but can I ask a question that I've wanted to ask smart people?
Yeah.
I don't want to derail your.
Do it. The only thing you're derailing is the formal email introduction between the two of you. That's forthcoming in a moment.
Matt's the only smart person on this podcast.
Okay, I don't buy that.
Because I'm not answering the questions. That's one thing.
That's right. Okay, so I'm the dumbass newbie, right? And I've heard the way to do this is low cost index portfolios, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. If that's the case, because I've been trying to get the perfect portfolio for me, and I know so little, but I spend so much time trying, and that's how I've learned a lot about asset allocation and Sharpe ratios and all that stuff, was trying to build my own portfolio. If that's the case, if the best, I'm doing air quotes, best way that a lot of people suggest, and allow me to put my foot in my mouth again, like I did when I asked you about the forecasting question. If that's the case, and if Jack Bogle's right, why do the richest people in the world, and this may go to your question or your point about everybody's different, why do they go to these hedge funds? Why do these things exist? Why? And I know why there are other products, but why is it that if nobody can beat the market, I'm doing air quotes. I'm not saying this. These are things I'm having to do them like this because
It's okay. The screen will get bigger for you.
Like this.
Yeah.
So I usually do air quotes like this, like a weirdo. But then why do the richest people in the world, why do you have to have $10 million to go to a hedge fund? Because only those people with that sort of money do that. Am I rolling another grenade?
Go ahead, Cullen. No.
Matt, you know the answer to this.
Well, I'm punting on part of it because I want Cullen's answer to this. The part I want to punt on is actually learning to think intertemporally, like thinking about intertemporal asset allocation or thinking about asset liability matching across time and time horizons, which, Cullen, I'm really hoping this is part of what's in the book, because I think that's a massive part of that, especially when you start to think cross-generationally. So the first is people who are rich, we often will confer that just because they're rich, it also means they're smart. And spoiler, there's a lot of dumb rich people, or there's a lot of really lucky rich people. You know, spoiler alert, just because somebody's rich doesn't mean they're smart. It just means they figured out something. Sometimes they figured out how to do something really, really well and extract a lot of money out of it. Sometimes you might look at that and go, I could do that too. And other times you'll look at it and go, I would never do that because I would feel like a horrible person after. There's a lot of that going on in the world. When people want to feel smart, one of the best ways to feel smart is to try to own something that you barely grasp. And there's a lot of smart people who own hedge funds and own things and sophisticated strategies. But the trick is, do they own them for the right reasons? Or do they own them just because this is a little bit sophisticated and it makes me feel good about myself? It's like driving in an unnecessary luxury car. Certain people are going to go, this is what makes me feel good. And it's actually a status and identity symbol that I can afford and can have this thing. And some people are going to be, I need this to feel this way about myself and I can afford to do it. Other people are going to go, and I'll give you an example out of, so like in some of these like LP structures inside of funds, if you're thinking multi-generationally, you're thinking, I want this money to be for my kids. We see this in real estate. We see this in other places too, where you go, great, I can take this thing, I can lock up this asset, I can take money away from this, it can pay me an amount of money, I can depreciate this thing down to zero, and under current estate tax law, I can basically die, get a step up on death to current market basis that will then go basically tax-free to my heirs. And there's certain hedge fund or LP structures that enable that type of multi-generational wealth transition. And you might not do that with your equity long short fund, but there's other stuff out there where people will do stuff like this and go, inside of my big complex arrangement, this is actually a really intelligent thing for me to own. And here's all these reasons why. And they would never make sense to mom and pop with, you know, $500,000 in their IRA. So it's a nuanced answer. A lot of it is just status signaling, but there is clever ways to do it. Cullen, how'd I do? And more importantly, the whole like intertemporal understanding. Give me something.
I think that's the word hedge fund is, I mean, it's a big umbrella. So like there's a lot of different types of hedge funds.
Yeah. And read More Money Than God. Like,
they could be,
okay.
You know, a volatility fund. It could be, you know, there's a long short equity only fund. It could be a CTA that's trading managed futures. Like there's so many different types of hedge fund strategies. And to generalize about it, which is dangerous, of course, I would say that the vast majority of these are, the way they're framed or the way they're benchmarked is probably unfair, in that they're probably benchmarked to something like the stock market or even 60/40. And a lot of them are so unique that they probably have their own sort of benchmark, but in a lot of ways, they're serving a very, very niche audience. Like my experience working with people that have like absurd amounts of money is that when you get to a certain level of wealth, after you've kind of allocated to the sort of boring stock and bond allocations, a lot of people will just splash money in places, you know, for like very alternative reasons. Like I know a lot of people that buy, like I'm not a big advocate of like, you know, volatility funds, but because a lot of these volatility funds, they literally just they're almost like insurance products where like the likelihood of them going to zero consistently is very, very high. But then every once in a while, they hit really big in like a super volatile environment and they generate like 1,000% in the month. And they get enough headlines that like they'll raise money for, you know, the rest of their lives. But that's the way a lot of these things work. But like that thing's operating as like this very, very niche sort of like insurance product for certain types of very, very specialized investors where, if someone's got $100 million and they can afford to burn, like literally light $1 million on fire every year, they might go out and buy this opaque volatility hedge fund that literally will go to zero 10 years in a row. And this person will light $1 million on fire every year. But then once every, 11th year, that thing goes from $1 million to $20 million.
And on the absolute loss, they're like, thank God for the tax loss, which is like, and you're like, how did you lose that? But they're like, well, tax loss, it works for me. Yeah. And then on the grand slam, they're like, that's why I own the insurance policy for this reason.
So it's in a general sense, like you also have like a lot of situations though, where it's like your average long, short equity only fund is probably getting pounded by the S&P 500 over consistent, 5, 10, 20 year periods where you can look at certain types of these funds and you can say, there's no reason for this thing to exist. Like there's a lot of products in this industry that I will look at and be like, there is no reason for this thing to exist. But then there's like sort of niche arguments that you can understand. Oh, well, okay. In the broader diversifier pool of all of the different assets that this person might own, maybe 1 to 5% of this is not so bad, but I don't know.
So what you're doing is you're telling me I should dump the long, short equity and market neutral funds I just bought. Is that what you're telling me?
No one's giving advice here, Mr. Vass. No one's giving advice here.
Also, I'd like to tack on, you said, hey, if you want to contact Vass at Coach Vass on Twitter, I would also like to specify if you're watching this and you feel sorry for me, you think I'm misguided, but you see the passion, you see the vision in me that wants to be an advisor at some point, and you think you can help steer me in the right direction. Also, please contact me because I need all the help I can get going into this new world. So yeah, I wanted to throw that in there as well. Yeah, I've just been fascinated by these strategies. This is just notes that I printed of Cliff's. Yeah, it doesn't do it any justice on camera. About 100 pages worth of Cliff's articles that I'm reading through it. Now, this idea, I have the Jim Simons book I'm reading now. The idea that these people could just crack this code and it blows my mind. It's not even about the money part. It's just and you read about these people and they're like, one of Simons' big researchers. I didn't care about, I'm distrustful of money, but I thought it would be a cool, intellectual exercise. And that these people can just create these strategies that out of thin air almost. It's for somebody that's that was told growing up, buy Coca-Cola and hold it till you die. It's very fascinating to me and being new to this world. So, and of course it's the flashy thing.
Well, I love having people, it's like how do I say this? The fresh blood, the freshmen, the people coming into the situation who are new and excited about something and learning about it. And I love that, unlike probably mine and Cullen's entrance into this industry and to so many other things, at least mine personally, right before the financial crisis period when I started learning stuff, thank God the internet was out there and was a resource for this. Because I don't know how I would have done this in the 90s with Yahoo message boards and whatever people learned on in that era either. So just knowing that somebody is looking at a second career transition, asking these questions, and there's people out there to learn from, that you can have hundreds of pages of Cliff Asness notes at your disposal, and you don't just have to go get a Journal of Finance thing that you need 6 degrees to be able to read 2 sentences and an equation in.
Well, the craziest thing, and I'm going to do a quick commercial for this. ChatGPT, I paid the $200 tier for the unlimited. It's really unlimited deep research. I have learned that thing is freakish. I'm like, explain, and it's like reading a book but getting to talk to the author. Because sometimes what are you talking about? Let me break this down for you. I've asked it 27 different ways about hedge funds and different strategies. I bought a managed futures fund. My green CTA I purchased. I've been able to learn. It's first of all, it's like drinking out of a fire hose, drinking water out of a fire hose. But I've learned so much, and just being able to ask directly, I've learned different things throughout my life. And to your point about the internet, Google's obviously great, the investing internet, but this thing now, where it basically writes you a fully detailed term paper on exactly what you're asking for. Like one of the things when I was like, I think I want to be an advisor, I was like, I'm 41 years old, I'm switching careers, and it gets to know you because I've asked it about my other stuff for writing purposes and websites. And it was like, here's a list of everything you can do in finance. And because you're this age, you may not want to go into this. And it just kept asking him more and more. And with the citations and everything, so it's good. I mean, it's literally, you click on the link and it highlights where it's pulling it from. I've learned so much in so little time. It's sometimes I'm like, I've been doing this for a very long time. And then I go, no, actually, this invention has helped me compress the time it's taken to learn stuff. And to your point, I don't know if I was on Yahoo message boards, I don't know where I would be.
Get some hot penny stock tips. That's for damn sure. That's what you'd be doing. Hey, listen, if it doesn't work out, the AI generated version of you will have that AI guest back on a future episode. You're watching Just Press Record. This is Cultish Creative YouTube. Coach Vass, Cullen Roche, thank you so much for coming out and hanging out with me today. cultishcreative.com to get your introductions to these two, and we are out. Thanks for joining us. Like, comment, and hey, subscribe below to Cultish Creative on YouTube if you haven't already. As the good compliance people want me to remind you, Matt Zeigler, that's me, is a managing director at Sunpoint Investments. The opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Sunpoint Investments. No information on this podcast should be construed as investment advice. Securities discussed in the podcast may be holdings of clients of Sunpoint Investments. I hope you've been entertained. I hope you found this useful. I hope you talk to a professional before you try any of this stuff at home. And most of all, I hope you've subscribed. Be nice to each other out there. And don't forget, head over to cultishcreative.com and let's make curiosity a habit together. And I'm out.